Hey everyone, I'm excited about today's video. We are going to be creating a login and register system using Firebase and React. Firebase provides a powerful back-end infrastructure, while React allows us to build interactive and dynamic user interfaces. So let's dive right in. Before we get started, let's briefly discuss what we'll be building today. Our goal is to create a login and register system where users can sign up with their email and password, and then log in to access protected content. Firebase will handle the authentication part for us, making our development process much easier. The first step is to set up our project. First, let's create a folder and give it a name of, let's say, Login Register. Then we are going to open up our terminal and run the following commands. npx create React app login register. This creates a React app. After this, we need to set up Firebase. Go to your browser and navigate to the Firebase website. After we are on the Firebase website, navigate to the Go to Console button and click on it. Then we need to create a new project and give it a name, check the two boxes below, and click Continue. We do not need Google Analytics for this project, so just uncheck it and create the project. Once we have the project created, we need to select what kind of project this will be, so select the web on the far right and give it the same name as the project. Now that we have our project set up, we can start with the fun part. At the end of creating the project, we came to the Add Firebase SDK, so let's do that. First, create a new file called Firebase.exe, and then we can copy and paste the code you were given into our file. With this done, you just need to add authentication and Cloud Firestore to your Firebase project. Now can create two more files with the names LoginJs and RegisterJs. First, we are going to work on the register system. Let's import the necessary dependencies. Now let's create the page structure and style it. We need one div with the class name container. Within the first div, we need two more divs, one with the class name wrapper and the other one with the name register card. Within the register card div, we will need 5 more divs with the names email, username, password, DOB, and the last one with the name buttons. In the email div, create a span with the text email and add an input below it. Do the same for the username and password div. Now in the DOB div, we will have one span that will say date of birth, and below that put 3 inputs. For the buttons div, we need one button with the class name register btn, and a div with an element in it with the text already have an account. With this done, we have created all the necessary things we need for the register page after we make it function. Enjoy this time lapse of me styling the page. And done. Now let's start working on the functionality of the register form. Let's create 6 states, 1 for each of the inputs. And let's give the inputs the value attribute corresponding to what the input is used for. Now we can start creating the functions that are going to make all this work. We will need 3 functions so we can validate our form. Let's start with that. The first function is going to be called VALIDATEPASSWORD, and we are going to give it the parameter email. In this function, we will need 2 constants, one with the name validRegex, and we will need to paste this here, and the other one with the name isValid, and the following code next. We add these 2 lines of code. So let's do a recap first. We create the function, then we declare a regular expression pattern that matches a valid email format. The next line uses the test method of the validRegex regular expression object to check if the email parameter matches the regular expression pattern. The result, either true or false, is stored in the isValid variable. The next line is used to set the error so we can display the error message later in our form. And lastly, we return the isValid variable. Now we can create the VALIDATEPASSWORD function and do the same. Here we can add all the things needed to validate the password. In this case, I will only add the condition that the password needs to be longer than 6 characters, but you can add conditions so that the password needs to have an uppercase letter, special character, etc. And the last function we are going to need to validate our form is the function that will check if all the fields are filled. The name of this function is going to be checkAllFieldsFilled. Then we're going to create a constant with the name fields with all the fields in it, but we will add .trim to them. Then we are going to filter through the fields and check if all the fields are filled. If they are, we will return true and remove all the error messages. If they are not, we will return false and display an error message. Now that we are done with the validate function, we're going to need 3 more states and add this line of code to display the errors. You can add them anywhere you want. I just think that this placement is the best for me. Now, we can start with the register function first. Let's import getFirestore and getAuth into our file. Then we can create a new function called register inside the function. We add an if statement that will check if the email is valid, if the password has all the requirements we added in the VALIDATEPASSWORD function, and lastly, it will check if all the fields are filled. With the validation out of the way, let's import create user with email and password, and create a collection in our Firestore with the name users. Finally, we can move on to writing the logic that lets you register. First, let's retrieve the authentication instance, auth, using getAuth. Then we can use the create user with email and password function with the auth instance, email and password as arguments. It creates a new user account with the provided email and password. Then we add this line that sets up a promise callback that is executed when the user account creation is successful. The user credential parameter contains information about the newly created user account. And we store the user information in a constant with the name user. Then we access the user's collection. We create another constant with the name user data that will store the user's input values and other details. Then we save the user data object as a document in the user's collection. And lastly, we add this block of code for debugging purposes. Now we add values and event listeners to all the inputs. And we are done now. Let's test it out. If you have done everything as I did, you should get the email you used in the authentication field, and you should get a new user object in the Firestore that looks like this. Let's move on to the login component for the login component. We will use an almost identical structure to the register component, so I think there is no need for going step by step for it. We just need 2 inputs with a span 1 for the email and 1 for the password and 1 button, and an A tag with the text, create account. In this component, we need 5 states, 1 each for the email and password, and 3 for the errors. Add the error messages where you fill. They will look the best. And copy and paste the validate functions from the register component to the login component. Don't forget to add value and event listeners to the inputs. And now let's work on the login function. First, create a function and give it the name login. Though we do the same if statement from the register function to validate the email and password, and we use getAuth to retrieve the authentication instance auth using the getAuth function. Then we need to import sign in with email and password to our file and use this function with the auth instance, email, and password as arguments. And what this does is it attempts to sign in the user with the provided email and password. Then we use the same promise callback that we used in the register function. Next, we store the user information in a constant, and what we do next is retrieve a reference to the users collection in the Firestore database using the getFirestore function. Then we add this line that creates a reference to a specific document in the users collection using the doc function. It combines the database ref, collection reference, and user ID to form the path to the desired document. Next, we add another promise callback that is executed when the document retrieval is successful. And lastly, we check if there is an account with that email and password. If there is, it logs you in. If there isn't an account with that email and password, we display an error message. Now that we have both the registration and login components ready, let's implement routing to navigate between them. We'll use React Router for this purpose. Open the terminal and run this command npm install React Router DOM. And then we write this simple code block that we allow us to navigate between the pages. And that's it. We've successfully created a login and register system using Firebase and React. We implemented the registration and login components and set up routing to navigate between them using React Router. It was fun. Happy coding, and see you later.